Well, welcome back, and what a delight to have back with us Jodell Onstott. She's the author of YHWH Exists. Now, this is an incredible research, and it's just volume 1. I think it's about 4.5 inches thick, and she has really done her homework on this. And let me encourage you, if you're a student and a pastor, you need this book. And it is terrific. We have a lot to talk to her about today, and I want to get into it. Hi, Jodell. Good to see you. Merry Christmas.
Good morning, Perry. Great to be with you.
Yeah. Thank you for your work. I would almost put you in the work in the category as an apologist, too, so thank you. Well, how ancient Israel's constitution established social justice. Have we, first of all, getting into social justice, what we mean by social justice today is different than its original meaning. Am I right on that?
Very much so. You know, today we have this idea that social justice equals equality for everyone. And that was not the biblical idea or the ancient idea of social justice. It was really more of a relationship between the state and the individual, and preventing one another from oppressing, whether that oppression came from the fellow man or came from the state. It was to provide that equilibrium, not a equality of outcome.
All right, so we're way off that today. So yes. What did ancient Israel have in mind when it comes to social justice as it relates to their constitution?
You know, you find that God, in the Constitution he gave at Mount Sinai, did a couple things. Number one, he set constitutional limits of liability. So he firmly grounded the idea of culpability, but there were limits to it. And let me give an example with that, with the idea of larceny, which is where a thief may have stolen an ox. Today, we would say that may be equivalent to a tractor or a mid-range car. But if a person came in and stole an item such as that, he would repay 5 times the amount. If he stole something worth a little less, like a sheep or a goat, then, which today we might say compares to a computer or to a small appliance, something like that, then the thief would pay 4 times the amount. If the products, say the state came in, they recovered the products either from the perpetrator's home, or maybe he had hawked it somewhere and it was recovered and it was fully intact, then he simply repaid double as kind of a penalty for his crime. But there was nothing more punitive beyond that if the item was fully recovered. Now, this contrasts very sharply to other ancient cultures. In the Hammurabi Code, which was roughly contemporary with ancient Israel, if a thief stole an item, he had to repay 10 times the amount. If he stole from the state, it was 30 times the amount. Now, in ancient Israel, the code made no distinction between the theft of a common citizen or the theft of the government or the priesthood. So God never had a higher stake in the arena than what the average citizen. Even the law treated God equal among the law. Now, bringing this into a more modern context, Sharia law. In Sharia law, if you commit a crime such as thievery, often your hand is chopped off. Sometimes it's an entire limb that is chopped off, depending on the how grievous it is considered. The Torah did not have any of those outrageous penalties. Death was never an option in Torah. If you were required to repay the debt, but the debt was repaid through service, either through employment. Every man had a heritage that he gained at birth. He could rent that out to repay his debt. Worst case scenario, he could enter the slave system, which was a type of welfare system. This contrasts again to the Hammurabi Code, where if you could not repay that debt, you were executed. So when you compare all the ancient and modern law codes, you find that ancient Israel's constitution, by establishing these ideas at a constitutional level, prevented a lot of loopholes, and every citizen knew the consequence. It wasn't like you could go in and play the game, well, I know I'm going to get out of jail because I can hire a good attorney or I can get off with some sort of plea bargain. these were set, and there really was no get out of jail card. So it really held the entire society accountable for their actions and created a lot of sanity and a lot of reasonableness within their culture.
Wow, look at us today. We're so far from that, so far. Where does natural law come into this argument?
Well, you find that this is something that if you read a lot of our founding fathers, whether it's Thomas Jefferson or Benjamin Franklin, you find that in their writings, they always talk about this concept of natural law, which is a very biblical concept. And that is that the laws God gave to humanity are the same laws that govern the universe. So when we look at physics, for example, we know, and what we have learned over the past few hundred years, is that the laws of physics work the same on Earth as they do at any point of the universe. They all play by the same rule book. So Torah embraces, or Israel's constitution embraces this same concept. In Exodus 12:49, it states one law, there shall be one law on your land, whether it's for your native citizen or somebody that comes in and converts, it is the same law. So Israel's constitution and American law embrace this same idea. You really have a lot of civil strife if you have part of your citizens living by, say, the American Constitution and part of them living by, say, Sharia. What happens when there is a conflict between them? Whose law will prevail? Will it be the Sharia law that will prevail in that conflict? Will it be the American? And what happens when those penalties are harsher or more moderate on one side versus the other? So you really get into a lot of social conflict with this. In Torah, you have one law where it doesn't matter if you're Israelite, whether you're Hebrew, Christian, Jew, Muslim, there's only one law of the land, and that law brings incredible peace and harmony because it establishes reasonable limits of social justice.
Wow. All right, let's jump up and come back a little bit. For those who are just joining us, you have done a lot of research on the parallels of ancient Israel's constitution and some of the fundamentals and elements of that were brought into the United States Constitution, correct?
Very correct.
Now, was that ancient constitution actually a blueprint or just parts of it?
In my research, I have found that our founding fathers incorporated about 85% of the Torah ideals in the modern American Constitution. One of the things that I often bring up with this is that it establishes balances of power where you have three divisions of government. Today we know it as the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. In ancient times, it was very much similar in ancient Israel's constitution, where you had the priest, which was your Supreme Court. You had a legislative in the Adah, which were the elders of the land, and then you also had you had the executive in a monarch. So you have that same division. It's just worded differently, so you kind of have to bring everything up to date.
All right, now let's jump forward to a little bit of our modern day problems. It seems that our court system is just jammed with nonsense. I mean, everybody sues everybody for frivolous things. I mean, the only people going to the bank on Friday are lawyers. Did the ancient Israel Constitution have anything to prevent this?
It really did. By constitutionally defining culpability, it took away a lot of the absurdity that we're seeing in cases today. Today everything is based on precedent. So you get one bad case and everybody wants to run and hold on to that one case to get their suit through the court system. So what you find, for instance, in a case where injury had been done from one person to another, say whether modernly we could say this is a car accident or we could say a workplace injury, if a person caused that harm, the Torah does not alleviate that culpability. So, but there is no penalties. In other words, there's no excessive penalty for crime when it's simply due to negligence. The person who committed the injury is simply required to repay for lost wages, to cause the person to be thoroughly healed, and to see that he has the best medical care possible. You know, and actually our court systems do in fact judge along these lines in many cases. The difference being that in Torah, the idea of intent is never divorced from the action. So if there is a criminal intent, that is always taken into consideration, and there are punitive damages that are awarded. But if it's simply negligence, then there are penalties, or rather there is just simply restoration. And this really differs in many ways modernly with the idea of insurance. You know, today we will distribute our liability among a group of people by us all buying into an insurance company or an insurance policy. And what this does is that it allows the group to absorb a lot of the cost. Well, in reality, say for instance, a car accident, if you are injured and you make a claim on your insurance, say an uninsured motorist or something like that, then your premium will actually go up. So the victim pays twice for the crime, once for the loss that he incurs, and then a second time with the increased premiums. The distinction that Torah would make in this is that the perpetrator or the person who is found culpable would pay for those increased premiums and any other liability. The insurance company could still come in where criminal intent is not a factor and pay for it. It's just that those the victim would not have an increased burden. And that is really what the Torah is all about, is protecting the victim, protecting those that are underprivileged and those that are in a greater capacity to be oppressed by the stronger among the community.
Amazing. All right, let me do a quick break here. And again, let me encourage you to check out Jodell's book. It's called YHWH Exists, Volume 1. This is an incredible research item for you to have, and you talk about an incredible resource for your library. Pastors, students, interested people, get a copy of this. It's very extensive. This is Volume 1. Look for it at the bookstores. Put out by Emmanuel Publishers, and it's called YHWH Exists. We'll be right back in just a moment.
Hi, I'm Paulina, and I work at theDove TV. Did you know that when you support theDove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us.
Okay, we're back today with Jodell Onstott. She's the author of YHWH Exists, and what an incredible resource. Let me tell you, she has really done a lot of work on this, and this is Volume 1. And not only a terrific researcher and author, but I'd put her in the category as what can I say, a very intellectual apologist and does a great job. We're talking about social justice, which is an interesting concept that has been really redefined in our day, and how it really finds its roots in the ancient Constitution of Israel. But Jodell, let me ask you this before we come back to social justice today and versus then. Ecclesiastes, when it comes to this, it calls for swift judgment, swift judgment. We're anything but swift today. So how in the world can we exercise what would be considered biblical social justice when we drag out a crime to where it almost has no impact?
You know, I think that if we come back to the basics, we come back to the important considerations, there are so many things that enter a case today that are really irrelevant. And let me give you one example. Insanity, which this is a very controversial topic. In Torah, a person's negligence was not a consideration according to the law. It states that though he be ignorant, yet is he guilty? And what the Torah ultimately looks at is the victim. God stands up for those who are oppressed, for those who have been taken advantage of. So if the victim has had a loss, or say a family has lost a member due to a crime, murder, then God stands up to protect, defend, and to seek justice for that family unit so they can have closure and move on. So whether a person committed a crime out of ignorance, whether they committed it out of insanity, is really irrelevant to the entire argument. There's still a loss, that the crime has still been committed and the damage has been done. So the Torah seeks restitution. Today, if we would get back to those basics and we would stick to the facts and not interject all of these other arguments, I think our court systems could really be sped up quite considerably. DNA evidence that we have now does take some time for lab work. It takes some time for research, and that's very important. We can't overlook that because it is a very strong evidence in cases. But, that usually takes at the most a couple months. And, you could allocate your resources so that you have more lab technicians. So there are things that we could do to bring justice to a swifter end.
We are a nation of laws, but we have bent those laws to have very little impact on deterring crime. I mean, the system now protects the criminal more than the victim. And I understand getting back to the simplicity of social justice, but can it really happen? What would it take?
I think that it can. I don't, today it really takes a agreement that a Torah-based or an Israelite constitutional idea is valid. It takes that returning to America's Constitution and looking at a lot of the values that we had at our founding fathers. Now, it wasn't all, I don't want to paint this rosy picture that everything was great 100 years ago, because it wasn't. For instance, 100 years ago, if a thief stole a horse, he was often hanged. So there were things where it went above and beyond what was reasonable. When we talk about natural law, one of the ideas of natural law that Torah embraces is Newton's third law of motion, where there are opposite and equal reactions. The wording in Torah is that it's eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Now, a lot of people take this very literally, but you really have to go back and look at the philosophical ideas. And the idea governing that is that any penalty that is placed on an individual should be opposite and equal in force. It shouldn't be greater and it shouldn't be less. So I think if we come back to principle and we allow principle and values to govern our decision, whether it's legislatively or in the judiciary, you're going to find a lot of sanity. And you're going to be able to bring a lot of justice back into our court system. Again, the idea of mercy, where is mercy applicable? And it's the exact opposite of what we do today. Today, we give hardened criminals, lifetime career criminals, our greatest leniency and our greatest mercy. But yet a person, law-abiding citizen, messes up one time and we throw the book at him. This is the exact reverse of what is laid out in a biblical idea, where the mercy is for the righteous and for the just to mess up from time to time. But for the hardened criminals, there really can be no mercy, because who's going to pay the next time that criminal messes up? He's going to perpetrate against another innocent citizen. So it just keeps the cycle going, where there's never any closure, and society is always at risk from these hardened criminals who really don't value life and they don't value property.
Boy, this is really interesting, because if you go back to the original understanding of what social justice is, it really kind of falls into the responsibility of the faith community, because they can, with social justice, also depart mercy and grace. And yet you need the firmness of the law on the government side to enforce it, so that it keeps it outside of when there's a hardened criminal. So I don't know, it seems to me it's a tough balance to find this thing.
It is. Now, remember, anciently, in ancient Israel's time, you would have had no separation of church and state. They would have been one and the same. So to commit a crime was to commit, whether it was against a person, or whether it was, just negligence, it was always something where justice was sought so that you had closure. And the ideas of grace and leniency were very much central to ancient Israel's government. And that balance was always to be sought with the priesthood and the judges of the land. And they did, in fact, have judges within their local communities. You actually had a court system, not totally dissimilar from today, where you had lower level courts, which would have been your elders and perhaps even elected officials more modernly. And then you had your federal, which would have been your Levites, who were very much trained and could judge in these cases. And again, if you look at the example of Moses at Sinai, it says, let those cases that be too difficult, let them go up basically the chain of command until the hardest cases come before Moses. And then those were taken, to the Ark of the Covenant, and they were decided above the mercy seat where the Constitution resided. So the implication is that every decision would always be based on this constitutional code God gave to ancient Israel, and that would provide the context and the integrity in deciding tough cases.
So, can a democracy and a monarchy coexist? Doesn't seem like they can. In Israel's system, remember at Sinai, there was no monarchy. That was very late. And when Israel adopted the monarchy, God claimed that Israel was rejecting him, was rejecting the freedom that he was offering them. So he was saying, this is a lesser way. What you find in the Judges era, and you find at Sinai, you find that a lot of these people the judges were probably elected. And if you go back even further to the Hyksos period in Egypt, you find that it kind of continues that tradition of election where a lot of the Hyksos leaders were elected as well. But coming back to Israel, you find that at Sinai, they're told to select, and this would be some sort of election that takes place to elect people within their communities who are known for law abiding, who are known for their wisdom and their judgment. And those people are the ones that are put in power to judge in cases and established as judges throughout the land. So there is a lot of democracy within Israel's constitution. Even under the monarchy, you find that Israel convenes during their 3 annual holy days, and not only do they take part in legislative ideas and decisions, but they also judge in criminal matters. So there's a lot of crossover. It is not as I would say that the branches of government are not delineated as accurately as what they are today, but that foundation and that idea is definitely instilled within Israel's ancient covenant. So Israel, it seems to me that Israel figured out a way that government wouldn't rule, but the moral fiber of the culture, biblical based, would be the overall factor. We started out that way, but now we have a government that's out of control. So you kind of wonder, how do you bring this thing back into alignment?
Yeah. One of the things that God did that was very smart, everything, you want to know where the corruption comes. You want to know where the source of, leading you astray comes. And I think the old adage goes, follow the money. So 2 things that God did in the Constitution really helped curb it. Now we know from the prophets that it was not people, it still is within the hearts and minds of the people. But 2 stipulations really helped. Number 1, taxation was constitutionally defined at 10%. So that way you didn't have a surplus of money that could just be used for erroneous purposes. It was kept low enough that it was used for things that were really important. The second thing that you had was a prohibition on accepting donations or bribes. Anytime you accept a donation, it really, you judge according to where the money came from. I can't tell you how many studies I have read, medical studies, and I'm saying, okay, this sounds good. This is a value that maybe I can even embrace because it is in line with other research I have studied. But then you go back and you find out that the study was funded by somebody who has a stake in the game, and that the conclusion was in the affirmative of the company sponsoring the study. That's not unbiased. That is very much, favors where the money came from. Same thing with campaign contributions. If you receive campaign contributions from a foreign entity like Saudi Arabia, then your policies that you're going to embrace when you cast your vote are going to be in line with where those donations came from. So the different things and the different statutes within the Torah's Constitution really have are really relevant today, and they can really provide a lot of, I would say, coming back to center. They can provide an infusion and a rebirth of morality in our nation that can really turn the tide.
Wow. This is absolutely fascinating. Let me say to our viewers and listeners, you can get a hold of Jodell through her website, and that's YHWH.com. YHWH Exists is the name, is the author, or excuse me, the title of the book, YHWH.com. And what an incredible resource. I only got about 40 seconds left. What are you working on next? Volume 2?
Yeah, I'm still finishing up my Judges Chronology article, which it will be the most comprehensive article that I know of on the Judges era, and in Volume 2.
Okay. Well, you're a delight. I just find this so fascinating. It would seem to me that if the faith community in America demanded us to get back to the simplicity of the Constitution, which is based on, as you're saying, the early ancient Israel Constitution, we might have a chance of restoring America. It's pretty simple, isn't it?
It really is.
Well, thank you again. You're a delight. Let's connect often, and look forward to talking to you after you get done with your articles, too.
Thank you, Perry.
Okay, again, go to YHWHExists.com, YHWHExists.com, and check out this book. Get it. It's a tremendous resource for your library. We'll see you next time on Focus Today.